Welcome to Unpacking the Athlete podcast, hosted by yours truly, Rob Martin. Today's podcast is being hydrated by Liquid IV. 1 stick of Liquid IV and 16 ounces of water hydrates you 2 times faster and more efficiently than water alone. 12 delicious, refreshing flavors to keep your hydration routine exciting. Contains 5 essential vitamins, B3, B5, B6, B12, and vitamin C. With 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks, it's made with premium ingredients, it's non-GMO and free from gluten, dairy, and soy. Liquid IV believes that equitable access to clean and abundant water is the foundation of a healthier world. Liquid IV partners with the leading organizations for innovative solutions to help communities protect both their water and their futures. To date, Liquid IV has donated over 39 million servings in 50-plus countries around the world. Get 20% off today when you go to liquidiv.com and use code UTA. That is UTA, abbreviated for Unpacking the Athlete. Use that at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using the promo code UTA at liquidiv.com. Welcome to Unpacking the Athlete, a podcast dedicated to diving deep into what makes athletes who they are. Today's podcast is a little different again, as I am interviewing a variety of people that raced Mud, Sweat, and Beer's mountain bike race up in Traverse City at Mount Holiday. I'm starting with Abigail Jean, who raced the 25-mile stout in the pro category. Here are some of her cycling and life accomplishments. She was very excited to podium this year at Mud, Sweat, and Beers. She also likes being able to race at a high level on her bike while at the same time being a full-time nursing student. And she was able to remain at work in the hospital during the world's COVID-19 scare. Abigail, glad you could be here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
First question. Did you do anything special the week of the race in order to feel better prepared?
Not anything too different than what I normally do. So I just did some chiller rides just to make sure that I wasn't breaking down too much muscle while getting ready for the race. I rode with the studio that I ride for, Intrepid Cycling. I went for a nice ride with them as like our end of season kind of get together for winter training, and just did some openers on Friday, and then it was race day.
And how many rides was that during the week?
I did 5 rides total throughout the week.
Okay. Everything was chill though, just other than the openers.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. What was your meal the night before the race?
I had chicken and pesto with some pasta and broccoli and asparagus.
Okay. Pretty healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any dessert?
No, I did not.
Okay. What time did you end up? How many hours of sleep, I guess, what I would want to ask, did you get before the night?
I don't sleep too well with races coming up, so I usually, unfortunately, get a little bit less sleep than I would like to, just with race day nerves coming up. So I think I got 6 hours of sleep that night.
What did you have for breakfast?
I had peanut butter and jelly toast. I can't eat too much because I also have really bad race day nerves. So a little bit of toast and a little bit of electrolytes in the morning.
That's pretty similar to what I do. Peanut butter and jelly toast.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll throw in an avocado as well because it's pretty easy.
Yes.
So, all right, let's move on to what type of hydration do you use when racing?
So during some of my shorter races, like this one was, I would say it's a little bit of a shorter race, I just use Heed, which is by Hammer. It's just an electrolyte drink. But for longer races, I would use Scratch Super Fuel, just for some carbs while you're racing. And then during the race, I used an SIS gel. I used 2 of those throughout the race, and then my electrolyte drink.
Okay, so you did use those during the mountain bike race.
Yep. Got to plan accordingly to when you can eat.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a 2 track. Let's throw something down.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, you don't want to eat during the single track, then you'll run into some trees.
Yeah, that's guaranteed.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. So why do you use the SIS gels?
It's a little bit thinner consistency, so you don't feel like you're breathing super hard and trying to also eat something. And you don't have to drink water with it. It's just a little bit easier on your stomach, too.
I agree 100%. I asked because I have an issue where I can't really chew or swallow things while I'm racing because I get dry mouth.
Yep.
And that gel is almost like an hydration drink anyway. So,
Amazing. I
yeah.
loved it.
Yeah, those are the gels I use as well.
Hmm.
Cool. Now maybe talk about your warm up before the race. How long was it?
It was about 25 minutes of just riding like the start area and the first few hills of the race. I warmed up with one of my friends, Emma, who was also on the podium. She's pretty awesome. So I warmed up with her for a little while and just did a few openers on my own after warming up with her for a little bit.
And then easy pedal?
Yep. Easy pedal the hills, just so you're not dying a little bit.
How did the race start for you?
This race always starts out super hard, especially in the pro category. We start out with the pro men. They like to go pretty hard off the start, so it's kind of just like hanging on while you still can. And then going into the neighborhood, it's pretty difficult because you feel like your legs are already super tired just from the start, and you're just trying to hang on while you're in the neighborhood. So, and then you get to the single
Okay.
track, and that's when the fun starts.
So for those that don't know, the race is at a ski resort
Yeah.
and you start at the bottom elevation of the ski resort.
Yep. Basically, yeah, you start at the very bottom and then work to the top of it.
And so it's gradually kind of going up a hill and then maybe down and then up a little more and then down a little. And then you get to a sustained little bit of a climb. And then you come out of the single track to a kind of like a gravelly type road that has a lot of loose stone on it and it's steeper there. And that climb, I think, is what she's referring to when she says you come into the neighborhood and your legs are kind of like, whoa, what did we just do?
Yeah.
Because it's a start and then it's hill and gradual hill and then a steeper hill that's a little bit longer too. So yeah, maybe now paint a picture for the rest of the race all the way to the finish line. How'd it go? What happened?
So I unfortunately kind of got dropped a little bit at the start just because it is super fast. It's hard to hang on. Like one pedal stroke is wrong, then you can get dropped pretty easily from the group. So I just tried to hang with some of the women that were in my wave with me throughout the neighborhood. And then throughout the single track, just tried to keep my pace going, I guess, and try not to get caught by too many of the waves behind me. So the expert men are the next wave behind, and they're quite fast, so they can usually catch a bunch of the people in the first wave. So just tried to hang on with the expert men that would come past me through the single track and on the 2 tracks and stuff. And then towards the middle of the race, it's a single track heavy race, which is, I'd say, pretty normal for Northern Michigan. I don't know about the rest of the country with racing, but for Northern Michigan, single track heavy races are pretty common. And then just tried to hang on while I could. And then you get close to Mount Holiday again, and you know that you're getting towards the end, and I just tried to not let people catch me. And then getting into the neighborhood, you're able to kind of put the hammer down a little bit if you still have legs for it and still like not letting people catch you. And at that time, you're also merging with the shorter race. So it's interesting, like trying to navigate some of those people as well. So just kind of doing all of those things of navigating and not letting people catch you. It's a lot to be thinking about all at once. So you get into the neighborhood that you were in at the beginning of the race, and then you have like probably 2 miles left. So You can really crank it out, and it's pretty downhill in the neighborhood, so you can really just fly through it. And then you get into Mount Holiday again, and it's a downhill, twisty section into the finish line. And then you go through the mud pit, and you're at the finish line, and it's awesome.
No incidents in the mud pit for you?
No, not this year.
Oh, so you have in the past?
No, actually, in the first Mud, Sweat, and Beers that I did, I avoided the mud pit. You get made fun of a little bit if you avoid the mud pit, so you just got to go through it.
You got to go through the mud pit, absolutely.
It's a must.
So you do get nervous pre-race. Is there anything that you do that you've found that helps you calm your nerves a little bit?
I just try to kind of visualize the course a little bit if I am familiar with it. So this one I'm pretty familiar with, like being able to ride those trails a bunch is super helpful. And then I just listen to music to kind of calm it and try not to talk to people in the mornings. Just kind of keep to myself.
So when you crossed the finish line, what place were you in?
I was in third for the pro women.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you felt pretty good about that?
Yeah, it was definitely a really good, strong start to the season, and I kind of wasn't expecting it, but I'm super stoked that I was able to really push myself a little bit harder than I normally would during races. Sometimes I find myself like getting in my head a little bit, but I tried to stay out of my head on Saturday.
That's good. I know, like sometimes if I'm racing and somehow I find myself all alone,
Mm-hmm.
I'll catch myself slowing down and I'm like, whoa, what are we doing? This is a race.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely a lot easier to stay out of your head when you're with people. But yeah, when you're alone, it's a little bit easier to just have those thoughts creeping in about
Yeah.
slowing down and all of that.
Can you tell us a little bit about the bike you rode?
I rode a Norco Revolver hardtail. It's super awesome, super light and fast and responsive in the single track. So I love it. It's probably my favorite bike that I've ridden.
Do you know what fork you have on the front?
I believe I have a Sid Ultimate on the front of it. Yeah.
Okay. You know what brakes you're using?
They are XTR brakes and then XTR shifting as well.
Do you know how much your bike weighs?
I believe she weighs around 20 pounds. Yeah.
And do you know what wheel set you're running?
They're Stans wheels. Yeah, that's what I know. They're a set of Stans wheels, I'm pretty sure,
Okay.
if that's a thing.
And what kind of tires do you got on there?
They're the Vittoria Mezcals. Yeah,
Okay.
they're my
I've
favorite.
used
I love them.
You love them.
Yes, they do.
I've used those before. They're not a bad tire.
Yeah, they hold up pretty well, and I don't know, I'm able to trust them more in the single track, I feel like, than other tires that I've ridden. So that's super helpful.
Nice. Last question. What did you eat and drink immediately following the race?
After the race, I had some regular water, and then about 20 minutes after, I had Scratch protein recovery drinks.
And did you have any food after that?
I had a Cliff Bar when I was done. I probably should have had a little bit more to eat afterwards, but yeah, that's
Okay.
about what I had. And then drinking more water because the electrolyte stuff is helpful, just it's not regular water.
Yeah. Abigail, thank you for coming on and sharing your mud, sweat, and beers story. Gratitude for taking the time out today to come on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Just a quick break from the show to highlight a sponsor, and we'll be right back to the show. Laird Superfoods helps you get more out of your cup of coffee by providing fats and mushroom extracts that we love and can keep fueling you throughout the day. They have better ingredients, amazing taste, and functional benefits. It's all natural with whole food ingredients, contains naturally occurring MCTs from coconut oil, no artificial flavors, colors, or additives, no sugar from highly refined corn syrup. honest and transparent products and labels. They have functional superfood creamers, instant lattes, and prebiotic greens. Are you ready to feel more energized, focused, and supported? Go to lairdsuperfood.com and add nourishing plant-based foods to your fuel from sunrise to sunset. Use our promo code UTA15. That's UTA, the number 15, all together at checkout to save 15% off your purchase today.
Next up, I'm talking with Chuck Hathaway, who raced the 25-mile stout in the expert 60 to 69 category. And here are some of his cycling accomplishments. He finished the Crusher EX40 with a friend that had open heart surgery 6 months prior. He placed 9th in his age group at Iceman, and a top 10 finish had been a goal for him. And he rode oar to shore with teammates in honor of a teammate that passed away shortly before the race, and they carried his number plate the whole race and across the line so he could complete the race. Chuck, I'm glad you could be here.
Well, thanks for having me, Rob. Been in the cycling community for many years now, and probably on my tail end of the racing scene. So
I appreciate you coming on, and we're going to get started with the first question. And I'm wondering if you did anything special the week of the race in order to feel better prepared.
I actually pre-rode the race the Thursday before the race. Leading up to that, 4 weeks up to that, we did a skills clinic every Friday night for Mud, Sweat, and Beers for anybody that wanted to come out and do some of the course. So I had been out on the course for probably 4 weeks prior to race day, so I knew exactly what the course was and what to expect.
You knew all the ins and outs of the course for sure then.
Yeah, our team didn't mark it this year, but in the past we've actually marked the course. So
how many rides did you do the week of the race? How many days?
I think I did 2 rides week of the race. I did some single track out on the Vasa single track, and then Thursday before the race I did the complete course minus the private property that can't be accessed only on race day. So.
Oh yeah, okay. Very nice. And did you do any higher intensity intervals that week or just pretty chill rides?
No, they were pretty chill. It takes me a few more days to recover than what it used to.
I understand. I mean, I'm not to your age yet, but I am getting older, and I have noticed that same thing where I need a few more days after hard workouts to recover. And if it's a race week, I don't know if I need to do any hard intervals. So
right.
I'm feeling you there. Next question is, what was your meal the night before the race?
Night before the race, usually date night with my wife of almost 39 years now. So we actually went to a Mexican place, and I had steak fajita nachos, actually.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that long marriage. And did you have anything else besides the nachos? Any appetizers, anything extra on your plate?
No, that was it.
What did you have to drink?
Probably a Diet Cola.
And then how many hours of sleep did you get that night?
Some reason after racing for 13, 14 years that I've done, I still get nervous. So I don't get really good sleep a night before the race, believe it or not, still. Even I've raced many, many races, probably around 6.5 hours.
That seems to be the theme with everybody. The sleep doesn't go so well the night before because of the race nerves.
Yep.
So you woke up. What did you have for breakfast? Race day.
I go to my go-to breakfast, which is Cinnamon Life, peanut butter crunch kashi, mixed together with blueberry and banana on it.
Fresh
Skim
blueberries?
Milk. Fresh blueberries. Yes, sir.
Oh, that sounds great. Oh, growing up as a kid, that was my favorite cereal, the Cinnamon Life.
Yeah, it's good. I enjoy it.
Wasn't that like the Mikey Likes It commercials?
It is, exactly. Do what Mikey likes. Exactly right. You're aging yourself too, so.
Awesome. You picked up on that. You're like, oh, this guy isn't a young buck. All right. What type of hydration do you use day of race, during the race?
So usually for mountain bike single tracking, I'll run a hydration pack, 1.5 liter water. I'll take one probably 20-ounce bottle with infinite jet fuel in it, and then I hit that on the 2 tracks and the gravel roads, and then hydration pack during the single tracks where my hands can be still on my handlebars, because I have a tendency to hit trees and run off the trails if I try to get my water bottle. And then I just use Cliff Bar gel shots.
So recently, Dylan Johnson, I don't know if you know who he is, he's a YouTuber. He put out a video and did some aero testing with a hydration pack, and he was actually more aero with the hydration pack on than he was with it off.
Nice.
I think you're onto something there with the hydration pack. And I used to always just do the hydration pack because similar on single track, it's just, I don't know, it's tough to reach down or even to put your bottle back without taking your eyes off the trail. And I've gotten a little better at that, but with this new video he put out with the new information, I'm thinking I might go back to a hydration pack to be more aero.
Yeah, I use that Swedish, the U-Swede. They have the strap system that's, they call it No More Dancing Monkeys, and it seems to be, it doesn't move. It doesn't move on your back at all. And it's just a 1.5 liter, so it's quite small.
That's perfect. How about now talk about your warm-up before the race and how long it was?
Warm-up before the race always has to be around a half an hour because I need to do about 5 miles. And especially with mud, sweat, and beers, because all your climbing is in the first 3 miles of the race to speak of. And so I do the first from Mount Holiday at the chairlift hill where it starts. I go out and I go into the subdivision. So I do all those hills in the beginning to give myself a pretty decent warm-up. Or I would completely blow up on that first section. I'm a type of guy that needs about 5 miles to get myself going. So,
okay, makes sense. And yes, a lot of the climbing is definitely right at the start, for sure. And I kind of did the same thing for my warm up. I don't know if it was quite a half hour, but it was pretty much a similar warm up with similar trail all the way up to the neighborhood and around the neighborhood a little bit, and then back down and up the steep hill for the finish too, before you go down.
Yeah, I just went through the subdivision down. I didn't do the downhill, but like I said, 3 weeks previous, I've been doing that because we did a skills clinic through Mud, Sweat, and Bears. McLean Cycle and Fitness put on a skills clinic, and I work there 1 day a week now that since I'm retired from UPS. So,
very cool. Now, how did your race start? Tell us how everything went when it started and maybe up into the neighborhood. How did everything go there? Was it packed? Any crashes? What's going on there?
No crashes, and the reason I raced Expert is because of the 60 to 69 is the last group of sport to go, and there's so much traffic. Last year we got held up many, many times before we even got into the subdivision. So this year riding Expert, you don't have that traffic. Everybody flows. I got passed by quite a few people going up the biggest hill at the end, but one thing I learned from a cycling coach years ago, you don't have to be the fastest up the hill, but you better have something at the top when everybody's recovering. So,
right.
Yeah, the beginning of the race went as smooth as can be, except that it's the hardest part of the race. It's where your heart rate is at the peak for sure, right in the beginning.
It's so true, and it's funny because you finish down a ski hill, so your heart rate's not very high because you're just kind of flying down the hill coasting.
Yeah, exactly. And you hear all the noise and the bells and whistles, so that certainly helps. Just like getting to the top of the hill in the subdivision, everybody's yelling and gives you that little extra boost.
Absolutely, a little more adrenaline rush from the fans. How about now paint a picture of the rest of the race beyond the neighborhood? How did that go? Tell us a little bit about that.
The rest of the race actually went without a hitch. I had a lot of clear single tracks. It was pretty spread out. I had a lot of fast sport people pass me in some of the 2 tracks, but We never had any backups in any of the single tracks. Everything flowed as good as to be expected. Just a nice race.
Nice. I really do like Mud, Sweat, and Beers a lot. I like how they do incorporate the double track it seems just when you need it, because then people can shoot on by and run up there and get into the next single track session and blast on away. And it doesn't seem like people get held up too much. And maybe it's more like that when the sport race goes off, but it just seems like it flows pretty good. And they got a good system there with the single track, double track alternating constantly throughout the race.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Northern Michigan Mountain Bike Association did a bang-up job of putting it in there. I think this year was more 25K than it has ever been. I mean, sometimes we're on the 25K for a mile and a half. So, and there's plenty of passing there.
Why don't you paint a picture of the finish too? Tell us how that went and how much fun the end is.
The end went fairly well. I got hung up with a pale ailer in coming down the hill, and he was doing just a fantastic job, and I was just encouraging him, and there was, I was not going to go around him. If it took me a minute more to finish the race and see this guy go through and complete a goal or whatever, and then two guys came around and passed, and I thought they were going to crash us, but I'm like, come on, guys, is 30 seconds going to make that much difference? Maybe it to you, but not to a guy that's 62 years old and has a pale ale rider that may be his first race, and he was nervous enough coming down that downhill. So, I got hung up a little bit, but it actually gave me more of a smile than probably if I would have been all out. So that's how the end worked for me.
So did you and the pale ale go through the mud pit?
We did. I've never been a opponent for the mud pit personally. I am kind of particular about keeping my bike clean. And when you have a race like we had last Saturday and, there was absolutely zero mud and you're completely dry, and then you go through the mud pit and then, you're standing there till you change your clothes and your feet are soaking wet and your bike's all muddy. That's my personal opinion. Not a big fan of the mud pit, never have been. And I've done every Mud, Sweat, and Beers except the first one. So.
Nice.
But yet I have gone through the mud pit every time. I've never done the chicken loop, but with protest.
All right. I was just going to ask that. I'm also like, the older I get, the less I want to ride if it's raining or if it's just rain, because I don't want to have to clean up the bike. And I go back and forth with that. I think some days I'm like, okay, yeah, or sometimes at Mud, Sweat, and Beers, I'm like, this is great. We've got a mud pit. And then I think this year's I was in the same boat as you, where I thought it would have been better without it because it was a dry race. The bike was clean. I was dry. And now I'm, like you said, soaking wet. So, yeah,
feet are wet, uncomfortable, and you're standing there talking to people, and your shoes are squishing. It's like, 15 seconds ago I was completely dry.
Yep. Do you get nervous pre-race?
I still do. We talked about that is about sleep. Pretty much my pre-race thing is I go off by myself. I think I'm better if I don't hang around and chat with people, and I just kind of hang out and get ready to go, do my own warm-up by myself usually. I don't do it with a group of people for the most part. I've been doing it for a long time now. I think 2009, maybe I started competitive racing and been doing several races every year since. But I still do. I still do get nervous where I really don't want to talk to a lot of people. And when race time's going, and I'm ready to go then.
So that's your trick to help calm your nerves, is just to go off and be by yourself and not be talking with people. That seems to make you more nervous. It's funny because I've had someone else say the same thing. They don't want to be around the people and chatting pre-race. After the race, perfectly fine, but for some reason it seems to amplify the nerves.
And it's not that I don't want to be around those people. It's just that if I have nerves, I don't want to be rude around the people. So I just as soon be off by myself, instead of being short with somebody because I'm nervous. I just go off by myself and do my own thing.
Definitely makes sense. Can you now tell us about the bike you rode? What kind of setup you got?
Well, I work for Specialized, so I have a Epic Pro, a full suspension. I've had it now since 2017. I got it just before Iceman, and it's actually one of my favorite bikes. That's why I haven't replaced it.
So what kind of tires are you rolling on that?
So I'm a big, huge fan of the Schwabe Rocket Ron up front, and I run a Thunderbird in the back just for less rolling resistance. The Schwabe just makes an incredible tire. I mean, the Rocket Ron, you can throw it into a corner absolutely as hard as you want, and it's gonna come back. You might be laying halfway down the side, and all of a sudden it just throws you back straight up. So it's been an incredible tire for me.
That's exactly my tire setup on race day.
Yeah. It's been. I don't want to do. Specialized has been coming out with other tires. They're fast track. They keep changing, making it look more kind of like a Schwabe Rocket Ron. But I haven't tried one yet because I'm comfortable with that setup tire setup, and I even rode that same tire setup up at Copper Harbor, and I didn't have any issues.
Nice. I know when I go to the mountains or even to Bentonville, I usually throw some heavier tires on just for more protection, but those tires are great in Michigan.
I just haven't found anything that it's any better.
So last question, what did you eat and drink immediately following the race?
That's funny because usually I change and stick around, but I've got 6 grandkids and they're all in sporting activities on weekends. So I had already missed one grandson's soccer game and then one of my granddaughter's soccer games, but she had one more after that. And then one of my grandsons plays flag football out in Elk Rapids, so I needed to get to that. So I left immediately after the race, got in my truck, stopped at Speedway, got a fountain drink, Diet Mountain Dew, and 2 granola bars, and headed to the soccer field.
If you don't have that going on, what would you normally do?
I would stick around and eat something off a food truck or something like that.
And then I guess after all the events with the grandchildren, what did you eat?
We stopped at a restaurant in Elk Rapids, and I think I had chicken tenders, actually.
Nice. Well, Chuck, thank you for sharing your mud, sweat, and beer story. Gratitude for taking the time to come on the podcast today.
Thank you so much.
Next up, I'm talking with Eric Langley, who raced the 25-mile Stout in Expert 40 to 49. Here are some of his cycling accomplishments. He has won his age group at the Iceman in 2016, 2019, and 2022. He also has many Fat Bike Series wins in Michigan, as well as podiums over the past several years. Eric, I'm glad you could be here.
Thanks, Rob. Glad to be here myself.
First question. Did you do anything special the week of the race in order to feel better prepared?
Before my races, I think I have a standard process that I do relative to my riding and training. And I think most of us that cycle kind of do the same thing. The week leading up to it is a little bit of a taper week, so you drop the intensity a little bit. One of my big rules that I have is always 2 days prior to the event, staying off the bike. I was told that a number of years ago, and I think it really does help me make sure that my legs are fresh when it comes to the events. So for a race on Saturday, I would stay off the bike and do almost, relatively no activity on the Thursday before. And then Friday, obviously, we do openers, right? Try to limit openers to about an hour to just kind of get the legs tuned up again for the race on Saturday. So that's the standard regiment I follow.
And so did you do anything on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday?
Yep. Typically for me, Mondays are my rest days because I do ride most Saturday and Sundays. So Tuesday and Wednesday, I'll do between an hour and a half and 2 hours on the bike. Small efforts, but mostly, tempo, moderate workout activities. So, and then because this was a mountain bike event, this week I made sure that I was on the mountain bike all week. Sometimes throughout the year, I'll mix in road But whenever I've got a mountain bike race coming up, I try to make sure that I'm on the bike that I'm going to race that week as well.
Good. Yeah, makes sense. So now take us to Friday night. What was your meal the night before the race?
So meals are interesting discussion for me this year. I actually, after a lot of apprehension, I finally started working with a nutritional coach just these past couple months. So I've been, really engaged with her, really focusing on, things like my protein intake. And it's interesting, to get an outside perspective to your nutrition. And I found out that I wasn't eating near enough protein or carbohydrates really to sustain the type of energy levels that I wanted to. So that's been kind of a really neat awakening for me. But I'd be remiss if I didn't admit that, Friday night before a race, I do have a fairly old habit that's going to kind of die hard, I think, here, and that's candy. I'm pretty good with candy, but when it comes to the night before a race, I've just got this mental security between, a little bit of sugary candy, make sure I top off my glycogen levels, make sure I get a little bit of that sugar the night before to have it. So again, don't tell my nutritionalist, but I tend to sneak that in, especially the night before a race.
That's great.
Yeah,
I like that. I might have a few extra cookies.
yeah. I mean, you're gonna burn it off the next day anyway, right?
Right. Now, how about breakfast before the race? What did you do?
Breakfast for me before an event, especially with the morning stuff, right? We typically go off early in the morning, so it's really low key for me. I used to try to eat like a larger breakfast, but now it's just a matter of topping things off. So Saturday morning I had an English muffin with, 2 tablespoons of peanut butter and that's it, right? I mean, I take the rest of my hydration or my nutrition on the bike during the event.
Nice and easy
Yep.
digestible, just to top things off in the morning. That makes sense. I like
Yep.
it. I'm pretty similar. I might do I'll do toast with peanut butter and jelly and an avocado.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
during the race, what kind of hydration do you use?
I've been a long-standing user for Infinite and their jet fuel specifically. So that's one of their caffeinated electrolyte drinks. In my tenure, I'm sure very similar to any, weekend, serious athlete where I went through a number of different types of drinks and hydration methods, in the last 10 to 20 years that I've been doing this, from Gatorade and water to sugar packets to a number of different electrolyte drinks. And I want to say probably about 8 or 9 years now, I kind of settled in on Infinite. Easy on my stomach, very consistent. The flavor is one of those things where, I think that's a big thing for folks when you're on the bike. You have to be able to spend 1, 2, 3, 4 hours sipping on something without getting sick of it. That's been Infinite for me now for, like I said, almost a decade.
Any gels?
So if I do the longer endurance events, if I have anything that's going to be over that, 2 hour mark, I will definitely mix in like some hammer gels. So I carry a flask if I've got any longer events that I do, or even for long training rides. I will
Yeah.
supplement to just, get a little bit of that extra sugar. And I think mentally the gels also help on some of the sub 2 hour events just to have it, but not necessarily use it, right? So if I'm at an event where I'm hitting the wall and I just need that little mental boost, sometimes I'll take a shot of the gel just to say, okay, I know that I've given myself some extra sugars. I know that in 10 minutes I should, feel that kick in. It also helps you drink a little bit, right? To make sure
Mhm.
that you're flushing, right, that gel down and make sure that you're keeping consistent with your hydration throughout the event.
Now, how about you talk about your warm up before the race? Did you do anything special during it, and how long was it?
So mud, sweat, and beers for me has been a special thing for the last, few years, really because of my connections to Traverse City. I've got a little weekend cabin up there at Timber Ridge. So local events like this for me is ideal. Myself and my buddy Jay Click, we always ride our bikes the morning of from Timber Ridge, and we take some of the finishing route for Mud, Sweat, and Beers to get into the back of Mount Holiday. It's a perfect warm up, gets you into that, 20 to 25 minutes of riding. You get to see the finish line. When we get there, we ride the start loop, and it's just enough that it's not too much before an event like this. So again, we're fortunate to be, have that opportunity about, having a place close by, that we don't have to drive there, right? So it's not, like our typical events where you've got to drive an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours sitting in a car, jump out of
Yeah.
the car, get on the bike and try to wake the legs up. So it's a different type of event for us, really just because of our proximity and my proximity to be able to ride my bike from home to get there from my home in Traverse City.
Yeah. That's cool. I like that. Do you have nerves before the race? And if so, what do you do to help calm them down?
I don't really think that I do. I joke around with everybody, and I mean, you and I have raced, a lot, in the last decade as well. I always kind of tell people I'm a mid-pack guy, right? Everybody needs those pack filler athletes, and I'm genuinely just, the kind of person that I really like riding. Every now and then I get lucky, you know, depending on the race that I'm in. I really enjoy the camaraderie that we have, especially in the mountain biking community. So for me, when I show up on the line, and I know you have these same situations, you turn around and the dozen people surrounding you, right? So a lot of times it's conversations, hey, how's it been? What's been going on? Like I said, I lined up, with Jay Click, obviously a buddy of mine, Nick Gill, John Osgood was there, Eric Hune, everybody that we've kind of come to know over the last several years of interacting with each other during these events, and this hobby of ours. So not really nerves for me because it is, a big event for me. It's always kind of one of those where I target, a top 5, top 10, right? Is kind of what I'm looking for. I never plan for the podium or expect it on stuff like this. Mud, Sweat, and Beers it's a long race. It's a very, very tough race to begin with. So getting on the podium is an incredible accomplishment. But yeah, as far as nerves go for something like this, I don't really tend to get adversely affected by them because again, for me, it's fun. And if I do great and I feel great, that's what it's about for me.
I like that. And to be honest, this was probably the first time I raced Mud, Sweat, and Beers where I didn't really have the nervousness. And I, I don't know if it's because I didn't have expectations because I haven't raced in a while, but it kind of was nice to not have that nervous anxiety feeling. I felt relaxed and calm, and it was going to be a fun day on the bike, and that's what it was.
Yeah, and you did quite well, by the way. So
Thanks. Can you talk about the start of your race and how it went? Maybe up and through the neighborhood from the start to about that point.
Mud, Sweat, and Beers is the start is critical, right? Now the start is critical in all of the races, but the start of Mud, Sweat, and Beers is very strategic when you start. Off the line, again, I did line up towards the front. Again, I had the goal of kind of staying up front. Didn't get a good start right off the line. Missed my pedal on the clip in, but again, that happens sometimes. As you start through the Mountain Holiday property, obviously you circle around the big hill. You move into some 2 tracks out of the back of the property that are relatively hilly. And that takes about a mile, mile and a quarter to get through that stuff. There's a small section of single track. And then, there's that big kicker hill to get out of the back of the property. So by the time you get there, you're either in a good group that you can work with, or you need to make a couple moves by the time, you're halfway up that hill. And that's kind of where we were at to start with. I was solidly in that kind of top 10, and the apprehension, I guess, or the situation that happens is when you're on that hill, there's only one of two things that you can do. By the time you crest that hill, you either have to just gut up and hammer through the neighborhood section, or you're going to mentally give up and kind of fall back in the race. And those are really the only two choices that you have. So going up from the start into that neighborhood, I think again it was myself, Jay Click, I had John Osgood and Nick Gill that were right on the climb in front of us. And Jay made a push to go between them. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to grab Jay's wheel because I know once we get to the top of that hill, once we crest out, he's somebody that I know that I can work with. And looking around to the other guys that we had, there were quite a few good guys. Dan McGraw was right with us, Brian Morton. There was a whole bunch of guys that were with us. And I said, all right, I think we can get a good group. When we crested, there was a couple guys I know that I think Jeb and Jaden, some other Colo TC guys, had launched off the front a little bit. So we knew that we were going to have some work to reel those guys in. But that was the start, right? I was in a good enough position that I thought I could sustain it, and I knew I had guys around me that I could work with.
That's a good start. Good
Yeah.
start strategy. Now maybe paint a picture of the rest of the race all the way to the finish line.
Okay. This was good. And I say it was good, in hindsight, because I felt good and I think I did pretty good. Going into this race, the last time that I raced was at Barrie on the gravel event, and I didn't really have the kind of day that I wanted. So I was really hoping that the legs would come around and they'd show up, and luckily they did. So after we crested this hill, it's funny. I talked to Woody, which I think is one of the other elite guys. When we talk about power on the mountain bikes, he was talking about, rolling through the neighborhood at between 350 and 400 watts, on a mountain bike, which again gives you some extra resistance, but you really have to pour on the power in that first section through the neighborhood. So again, myself and Jay, as we moved through that neighborhood and we started into the course proper, we had a group, I think by the time we hit the single track, we had a group of about maybe 7 or 8 guys. And we had kind of broken free by the time we got, out of the neighborhood and into the single track. So, as you're maneuvering through, you're kind of looking over your shoulder, checking out the back of that line. I said, okay, good. 7, 8 guys, that's manageable, right? That's something that we can work with. I made the positive, mental decision that I wanted to stay towards the front of this group because I do ride these trails quite often. And I know that I was going to, I had pre-ridden it a couple times. I know a lot of the sections. So I didn't want to get lost in the mix of this group that we were in. I wanted to stay towards the front. So really for the first few miles, it was myself, Jay Click, him and I traded off. As you move off the front of the line, you make sure you settle right back where you want to be, right? So you don't float all the way to the back. So whenever we got onto the 2 tracks, sometimes there'd be some jockeying. Dan McGraw definitely stepped in and helped us out as well. But it was definitely one of those conscious decisions to kind of stay in the top 3 from the group. So once we got about halfway out, and I think about halfway in Mud, Sweat, and Beers, it was a counterclockwise course this time. So in and out of single track and 2 track, you work all your way to about Williamsburg Road, right, which is the big road crossing from the Iceman race. By that time, I looked over the shoulder and I think we had whittled it down to about 5 or 6 guys in the group. And again, I don't have the best handling, right, of most of the mountain bikers, but I'm fairly decent with power when it comes to some of the straightaways. So I was kind of letting Jay and Dan manage the single track, and then when we hopped out on a 2 track, I'd jump in front and I'd put down some decent power, right, to keep the line moving forward as best we could. So the last few miles, and I'll say maybe the last 5 to 8 miles when we were coming in, I thought about this and it was very funny. Again, we're down to maybe, like I said, 5, 6 guys now. And I had put down this big dig on this 2 track, right? I mean, I was emptying the tank trying to maybe shed 1 or 2 more guys, off the back. And Jay Click came around me and we talked about this afterwards to some of the guys that were in line. Jay was kind of getting twitchy in his saddle and just launched himself right before we got to the single track. And I remember sitting here thinking, son of a gun, because he launched, and he probably got a gap of 4 or 5 bike lengths right away into that single track. And I looked over my shoulder and I remember thinking, no way, there is no way I have been working this hard to let this race go now. So it was the only 1 or 2 matches that I had left in my arsenal. It was light those suckers, and I turned myself inside out to grab Jay's wheel because I knew that's the dig that he was making. And sure enough, by the time I caught up with him, I looked over my shoulder. There was one guy maybe 10 yards back, another guy 10 yards back before him. Jay really kind of annihilated the group. As I nestled up to Jay, I looked back. The guys were 20 yards behind us, another 2 or 3 miles. They were continuing to fall off. So it was definitely kind of the move that we wanted to stick with. And what also happened at that time was we saw the two guys up ahead of us. So I think it was Ryan Ritter and John O'Hearn, which John, again, local guys up there, or John is anyway. And he's a big, I see him on the speed of light runs that they do on the Vasa all the time. He's a really fast guy. But once Jay saw those two guys, which we thought were second and third, and I guess it ended up being the third and fourth position guys, Jay was on him. So he's like, we've got to catch these guys. So we spent, the next couple miles knowing that we were going to get to that neighborhood trying to reel them in. So by the time we came out of the single track back into the neighborhood, Jay had caught them and I was dangling. Okay. Like I said, I used my last match to grab Jay's wheel before and kind of get a little bit of space between the 5 or 6 guys that we were with. By the time we got to the neighborhood, I was shaking my head saying, I don't know if I've got this final kick to reel those in. So we went through the neighborhood. I was about 20 yards behind Jay and John and Ryan, and we went down the hill, right? So the hill that we climbed out of Mount Holiday, now we're going down it. And I know that, right, this is the last, 4 minutes of the race at this point. We ran into a couple lapped riders, and Jay and the group had gotten down the hill, and I kind of made the mental decision at that point that I'm like, all right, I'm not going to be able to go elbow to elbow with these guys. And I was still happy with where I was with the race overall. So I kind of backed up a little bit. I let the lapped riders in front of me go down the hill. And as I turned off the hill onto the 2-track, I took a bad line and I came around the wrong side of a lapped rider, and him and I kind of got into it a little bit. I took myself out. And at that
Oh,
point, I sweeped his back wheel. It wasn't him, it was me. I was coming in, from that downhill much more aggressively than he was. And I didn't check my line properly. So by the time I was falling down behind this guy, I was watching Jay and the other two guys crest that 2-track hill right into the back of the property, which again, at that point, I knew that I wasn't going to be in it to win it or even get on the podium, but, hopped back on my bike. I passed the rest of the guys, finishing into the back of the property, checked over my shoulder. I knew that I had, a pretty good gap. So again, splashed through the puddle at the end of it. And again, I was really happy, overall. I ended up 6th in my age group, so just missed that top 5, which I was fine with. I think I was 38th overall, which is to say that, there's a lot of guys from this 40 to 49 and even some of the younger guys that ended up beating some of the guys in the elite ranks as well. So again, it's a quick group of guys, 38th overall. I was pretty happy with 6th in the age group. I'll take, and it was a good day on the bike.
that's awesome. That was a good story too. I like your storytelling skills, man. Oh, that was good.
Good.
How about now tell us a little bit about your bike that you rode?
So that's another one. So for the last several years, I've been racing my hardtail fairly exclusive when it comes to the mountain biking events. And, a year and a half ago, after listening to everybody on their full suspensions about how efficient they are, and of course, I'm not getting any younger, I went ahead and got myself a Santa Cruz Blur CC. Good full suspension bike. I'm still not at all used to the rear suspension. And again, not because of the bike, but really because of my suspension knowledge and skills. I haven't tweaked and tuned it enough. I need to play a little bit more with the pressure on the platform. So this was my first time kind of racing a full suspension bike. But again, I told myself that after, the last 3 years of exclusively doing all my events in the hardtail, I said, I'm going to commit this year and I'm going to do everything on my full suspension, because I have a lot of different bikes and I do try to ride them all, but this was a mental, I think, decision that I made at the beginning of this season, that I just
Yeah.
need to dedicate, right, some efforts on the full suspension, right? I've seen the other guys do it and kick my butt. So again, I'm hoping that maybe I'll get a little bit of magic boost. But yeah, this was my first time really, settling in. I think I raced it maybe once or twice at the Mayberry time trial, just when I was playing around with the bike. But this year I'm gonna race it exclusively, I think.
What's the travel on the suspension?
I've got a little bit of a mullet, so to speak, right? So the Blur CC typically comes with 100 millimeters front and rear. With all of the new cross country bikes, with everything going to 120, I ended up mixing it up a little bit. So I have the Sid Ultimate 120 up front. I still have the 100 in the rear, which when you talk about stroke distance and everything else, it's really, I think it's actually like 110. So it's not that much different. But I wanted to make sure that I use the shorter suspension travel in the rear because that model came with the full lockout. So I was able
Yeah.
to build that bike up right with a 120 up front, 100 in the rear, but still maintain the full lockouts, which for, cross country racing, there's always situations, start of race, punchy climbs, flat pavement sections, or flat two track where you need to lock out that suspension to just make sure you're as efficient as possible.
How about tires?
So tires are a tough discussion for me. For years, I was a die-hard Racing Ralph guy. Front and rear, again, I've just been a big fan of those tires. And then, as you know, a couple years ago, they changed the pattern to make a front tire specific and a rear tire specific, the Racing Ray and then the Racing Ralph in the back. And I just had never come to terms with those. So I've been trying a number of different tire combinations. I went through the Vittoria. I've got Metzgels on my hardtail that are pretty good. I tried the Barzos on my full suspension a little while ago, and I ended up settling back this year on the Maxxis Aspens. I think they're really a good all around tire. They're a quick tire. I think for most of the Michigan trails, they're pretty good. I got the wide tread version, so I'm adapting a little bit more to that wider purchase that some of the new tires afford us. So yeah, the Maxxis Aspens, I think. And again, when you take a look at and again, I'm a mid pack expert rider, right? When I take a look at the guys in the elite ranks and everything else, right, we're all looking at the next guy up, up the ladder. What type of tires are they using, right? And I've seen quite a few guys using those Aspens as well, so that's where I'm going to settle in on, I think, for this season.
Last question. What did you eat and drink immediately following the race?
So I'd love to say, I was a really good athlete and I immediately hydrated and moved to my recovery shake that I had ready. But unfortunately, I'm just not able to. And the order of the process was a little bit reversed because after all, this was mud, sweat, and beers. So I partook immediately in the beer line. I grabbed myself a beer and raised a glass with my friends. So again, I did follow up later with the water and the recovery shake, but this is that type of event where you put forth a big effort, you need a little bit of reward right away. That's what this event really is. So again, mud, sweat, and beers. A beer was the first thing in my hand when I finished.
That's awesome. Eric, thank you for sharing your mud, sweat, and beers story, and gratitude for taking the time out today to come on the podcast.
No, it was a lot of fun, Rob. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Next up, I'm with Reese Draka, who raced the 12-mile Pale Ale Sport Female category and placed second as an 11-year-old. Here are some of her cycling accomplishments. In 2021, she was second overall in the Miska Advanced Elementary and first in the Iceman Slush Cup. In 2022, she was first in both of those same events. And in 2023, she was seventh in the Dirty 30 Unclean 16-mile gravel race and fifth in the Barry Roubaix 18-mile in the 11 to 18-year-old category. Reese, glad you could be here.
I'm so happy to be able to be here. Thank you for having me.
First question. Did you do anything special the week of the race in order to feel better prepared?
Every night I kind of had like a visualization. We did that for swimming before a race, and that does seem to help me. I just picture a trail before I go to bed, and I try to picture how I want to do in the race.
Nice. Did you do any rides that week?
I think I rode 5 or 6 times. I did not ride the night before the race. And then I also had other sports and stuff.
Yeah, your other sports like swimming?
Yep, swimming. And horseback riding has not started yet, but
All
swim.
right. Cool. How about the next question is what was your meal the night before the race?
We went to a place called the Flying Noodle, and me and my dad shared a Caesar salad. I had a pasta with marinara sauce, broccoli, and some cantaloupe.
Nice.
So
Where
pretty
is
good.
that restaurant at?
I think it was close to Cadillac.
Okay, so you guys were staying up there?
Yeah,
Okay, so you guys ate somewhere up there. All right,
yeah.
cool. Now, how about the morning of? What did you have for breakfast?
I had an idea to just go to like the grocery store and get some bread so we can just make like sandwiches in the morning. So I had 2 pieces of meat on a thin bread, and I had some mustard and mayo on it. And then we also got some fruit, so I had some strawberries and watermelon.
And how about, did you have anything to drink?
Yes, I have Scratch hydration mix. I like to have that and then water before the race.
Okay,
Lots of water.
so the scratches during the race and the waters before the race?
Some races I do water instead of scratch while I'm riding. It just depends on how long the race is and the heat.
Makes sense. Now, how about talk about your warm up before the race and how long that was?
We actually went on the trail for the warm up. We did like the first little part, and then we finished through, like, we cut through a section to the finish, which was
Okay,
probably like 1.5 miles. So it was pretty fast.
okay, nice. Did you do anything special in there or did you just kind of ride it?
We just kind of rode it just to see like what the trail looked like. Me and my dad have never ridden that trail before, so we just wanted to see kind of what it looked like.
Now, how about you talk about how your race started, maybe from the bottom of the ski hill at the start up to the neighborhood? How did things go?
Good. We started, I felt pretty strong. I think I pushed it a little too hard up the first hill though. I think I was in a little too hard of a gear because afterwards I definitely paid the price. My legs
Oh,
were burning.
they were burning a lot.
Enough where they were like, they feel really warm. They weren't that bad, but I could definitely feel it. I did get stuck behind a few, like there was lines of people going through the single track, so it was hard to pass. There's just a lot of people there, so there was a lot of holdup. It was slower than I wanted it to be. Like I thought I would go a lot faster in there.
Okay. So, how about now maybe talk about the rest of the race and did you get around people? How much faster did you get going? Talk about the rest of that.
I think I got up to like 28 miles per hour on the flat ground. Through the single track, every single time that we went through a single track, there was a lot of people. So there was really no like good passing in the single track because it was just lines of people. But then once we got to the flats, the 2 track, that was like go, just so you could get past as many people as you could. And when we split off the 24 and then the 12 mile, I didn't know, so I actually took a wrong turn. And then Sammy from my team, she was like, Reese, you're going the wrong way. And I was like, oh my gosh, of course I am. Because I'm just on the wheel of the other person. I just wasn't focusing. So then I just sprinted up that hill, tried to get a little bit of ground so I could get past people before we went back into the single track. And I think then we went back through the neighborhood, which was fast. Just tried to get behind people and draft. There was more downhills on the way, so it was faster. And once we came kind of to the end, I did have a crash on the last hill. there was two people. One guy was like on your left and he thought he could make it, and then someone zipped by my right and hit my handlebar, and then I fell over on that guy. So we were kind of both there, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" But after that, it was all downhill, which was pretty smooth. And then we came to the mud pit, and there's a guy in front of me who went through there, and I was like, this is not going to be fun because I knew I was about to get soaked. And I went through the mud pit, but only one of my shoes got like really wet, and I was like, that's weird. But we finished, and I was happy because I knew that I had nothing left.
Nice. Yeah, usually when you go through the mud pit, whatever foot's behind, if you usually go through flat, whatever foot is back, that's the foot that gets more wet.
Yeah. I didn't
So
know
you
that.
got,
I thought they were both just going to get soaked.
oh, so you got taken out by some crazy old guys?
Oh, yes. They were just zipping past. It was like on your right, on your left, and I'm like, oh my gosh. He just come right by you like a bullet.
And then they got your bar and down you went on top of them?
Uh-huh. And then the first hill, there was like sand on the left side, and some guy hit my handlebar again, and I just slowly started tipping over.
Oh,
And then, but that wasn't that bad. I got out of that one pretty quickly.
nice. Do you get nervous before the race? And if you do, what do you do to try to help calm your nerves?
I definitely get nervous before races. I always have, like, every time we're riding over in the car, I always start shaking a little bit because I'm really nervous. But what I like to do to calm myself down, I like to get on my bike, look around, and then I just close my eyes and take a few deep breaths because I like being on my bike when I do that because I can just feel like where I am. I know that I'm like safe on my bike. I don't know why. I just have a feeling like that.
Tips from the 11-year-old racer. All right. Now, how about talk about the bike you rode a little bit?
I have a Scott Scale RC World Cup bike. I have SRAM shifting, and well, I have SRAM gears, I think, and then I have electric shifting. I have egg beaters, which are clip-ins. I think I have a carbon seat post and then a carbon saddle, too.
Okay. Do you know what tires you're running?
Oh, actually, I don't know. I know that I have a 29 bike, though.
Okay. So it is a 29-inch. You just don't know what tires you have on there?
Yeah, they're like, if you know a fat bike, they're like half of that, so like this wide.
Okay. Yeah. So they're probably like 2.25.
Yeah, or something like that.
Last question. What did you eat and drink immediately following the race?
After the race, I usually just find whatever like food there is. After the race, I think it was like a barbecue pork sandwich with like red onions, lettuce, a little bit of tomato, and then the barbecue pulled pork. And every single race, I always have to have either a chocolate milk or some sort of Gatorade. Every single race.
To help you recover a little bit better?
Yep, get everything back that I lost.
That's awesome. Well, Reese, thank you for sharing your mud, sweat, and beer story. Gratitude for taking the time to come on the podcast today.
Thank you. It was fun to be here.
Absolutely. This was a lot of fun. And to all the listeners, gratitude. You have just listened to Unpacking the Athlete.